We're going to be creating semantic elements or block elements on our pages to hold all of our content together. If we go to a website, like for instance, CNN.com, it's held together by a lot of different boxes. These boxes hold the content and the navigation in the right location. They hold pictures near each other and blocks of text near each other. And if we really look at it, once it loads, of course, it is a bunch of different boxes. We may not be able to see all the boxes, but they are there. So for instance, let's think about like this navigation up at the top with the black bar. That's a box. It's a box containing the entire navigation going across the page. You then even have a sub-navigation right below that is contained within another box. Then you have people, are the last people touched by the pandemic story, which is in its own box, labeled with these other things within that column. Then you have a separate column and a separate section and even a third column over here, all boxes. If we scroll down, more boxes. If you think about it, there could be an invisible box around these links right here up at the top, holding them together. There's probably an invisible box around this advertisement to hold it off to the right. Each of these columns would also be a whole nother box. As you keep scrolling through things, start looking at where would you put an invisible box to hold these pieces together? How would you make sure the opinion section stays completely together and the politics section stays together? A box. So it's important to note that almost every website, actually, like almost every website, unless somebody doesn't know what they're doing, is made by boxes, individual boxes. And what we call these boxes is block elements. Now, we've made a box called a div before, and divs are great. They can be used for anything. You can make multiple divs and have them do all these different things. But there's these certain elements that almost every web page has. If I scroll to the top of CNN, CNN has a navigation. The navigation is up at the top. It's the same on almost every page. If I go to the world section, you'll see that it's consistent for the user. The navigation is something that appears on almost every website. If you think about the website that you've gone to most recently, it's got a navigation bar, okay? We have the ability to tell the computer and the browser, this is the navigation, by using a nav element. So when we talk about block elements, we're talking about these elements that you see on almost every website. Almost every website has a navigation. Almost every website has a footer all the way at the bottom, which of course is loading. This big gigantic footer that they have. There's a footer where you can see things about it, like especially the copyright information, terms of use, about us. All that stuff tends to appear at the bottom of a web page. And then you have the actual content in the middle, right? All of the article information or the most important information that you may need. And then you can even have a header. So when we talk about this, the other piece about it is how it's structured when I start making my screen smaller. When I start to make my screen smaller, I want it to organize in the correct fashion. So if I'm looking at it on a phone versus a computer, it's organizing it in a way that makes sense. So when we talk about these block elements, we're talking about elements that are seen on almost every web page and are used regularly. So what we previously did was we created some pens and CodePens. We're going to go ahead and do that again. So go to CodePen and create a pen. And we're going to name this, when we get the pen open, up in the top left-hand corner, you're going to go ahead and name it to be first website layout, and then put a dash and put your last name for me. So this should be your last name right here. So I'm going to put last name so you know what it is. And I'm going to take my JavaScript, I'm going to drop that down, and I'm going to take my CSS and kind of bring it down a little bit. Now, what we've done in the past is we've created a box using a div. So I'm going to go ahead and create a div tag and say this is a box. And then remember, a div tag contains things, a box contains things. So I'm going to close it with a close div tag. Okay. Now, what we've previously talked about with a box is the box exists, but the box goes all the way across the page. And to make the box appear for us to see it and not be invisible, which, by the way, we just looked at CNN, almost every box is invisible, right? It's just got a white background, it has nothing going on. But if we wanted to make it visible so we could see it, we can call upon the div in our CSS, open up our curly brackets, and give it a background color. Make sure you spell background correctly and all those kinds of things. So I'm going to give it a background color blue so I can see it. You can see that as my page gets bigger and wider, this gets bigger and wider, and it's going to automatically adjust. We can set a height and a width to this real quick. So remember, we can set a height of like 200 pixels and a width of 200 pixels, and you're going to see it adjust to that size. This is a box, right? So we can make boxes, but there's specific boxes used for specific reasons, and that's what we're going to start looking at today.